millionaire's baby refused every bottle, until the maid saved him. A newborn baby was dying. Every bottle rejected. Every formula refused. The millionaire father stood helpless as his son grew weaker by the hour. Then the young maid did something that would change everything. Something that would expose a devastating secret and transform 3 lives forever. This is their story. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the nursery as another piercing cry shattered the silence of the Manhattan penthouse. It had been 36 hours since Catherine died bringing their son into the world, and 36 hours since baby William had taken anything close to proper nourishment. Jonathan Pierce stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, his reflection a ghost against the city lights 20 stories below. His Armani suit was wrinkled for the first time in his corporate life. His usually perfect hair disheveled from running his hands through it in desperation. Behind him, the pediatrician closed her medical bag with a soft click that sounded like a death knell. "Mr. Pierce, I've tried everything," Dr. Matthews said, her voice heavy with professional concern. 6 different formulas, 3 types of bottles, various nipple shapes and flows. Your son refuses them all. He's losing weight rapidly, and his blood sugar is dangerously low. If he doesn't take nourishment in the next few hours, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Jonathan turned from the window, his ice blue eyes. The same eyes that intimidated boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals, now red-rimmed and desperate. There must be something. Some medical intervention. A feeding tube. Something. That's our last resort, Dr. Matthews replied gently. But Mr. Pierce, I need to be direct with you. Some babies, especially those who've lost their mothers at birth, struggle with bottle feeding. They instinctively search for what they know, what they're biologically programmed to seek. Your son may be experiencing severe distress and rejection of artificial feeding. William's cries grew weaker, more hoarse. The sound cut through Jonathan like broken glass. "I'll call the hospital," Dr. Matthews continued, gathering her things. "Prepare for admission tonight. We'll need to start for nutrition if—" "Wait." The voice came from the doorway, soft but clear. Both adults turned to see Elena Rodriguez, the young woman who'd been hired just 3 days ago as household help. She was barely 23, with kind dark eyes and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. She'd been standing in the shadows, watching the drama unfold with increasing distress. "I'm sorry," Elena said quickly, her slight accent coloring her words. "I shouldn't speak, but I might be able to help." Jonathan stared at her, this girl he'd barely noticed in the chaos of the past days. "What do you mean?" Elena stepped forward hesitantly, wringing her hands. "In my village in Guatemala, I worked as a midwife's assistant. I learned many things about babies and feeding difficulties. And She paused, her cheeks flushing. "I had a baby 7 months ago. She didn't survive. But my body still." Understanding dawned on Dr. Matthews' face. She exchanged a long look with Jonathan, then turned to Elena. "You're still lactating?" Elena nodded, tears forming in her eyes at the mention of her lost daughter. "Yes. I came to America to start over, to forget. But maybe this is why I'm here. Maybe I can help little William." Jonathan's mind reeled. The suggestion was unconventional, possibly inappropriate by modern standards. But as another weak cry came from the bassinet, he found he didn't care about convention. He cared about his son surviving the night. "Dr. Matthews," he asked, his voice breaking slightly. The doctor moved to the bassinet, looking down at the tiny, weakening infant. "Breast milk is ideal nutrition. If she's healthy and willing, it could save his life, Mr. Pierce." 20 minutes later, Elena sat in the antique nursing chair that Catherine had carefully selected months before, never knowing she wouldn't live to use it. Jonathan had left the room, unable to watch, unable to process the strangeness and intimacy of what was happening. Dr. Matthews remained, monitoring William's vital signs with professional detachment masking deep concern. Elena held the tiny baby against her, her hands trembling. "It's okay, pequeñito," she whispered in Spanish, then English. "I know you miss your mama. I know everything is wrong and scary. But you need to eat, sweet boy. You need to live." For a long moment, nothing happened. William squirmed and fussed, his little face scrunched in distress. Elena closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks as she thought of her own daughter, Maria, who she'd held like this for only 3 precious weeks before a fever took her away. "Please," she whispered to the universe, to God, to whatever force had brought her to this moment, "let me save this one. Let something good come from all this pain." And then, as if answering a prayer, William latched on. The change was instantaneous and miraculous. The baby's body relaxed, his frantic movements stilled. Soft suckling sounds filled the room, the sound of life being sustained, of a crisis averted. Dr. Matthews exhaled audibly, checking her watch to time the feeding. Elena looked down at the baby in her arms, and something broke open in her chest. A dam of grief she'd been holding back since leaving Guatemala, since burying her daughter in a small cemetery overlooking mountains she'd never see again. Tears fell freely now, dropping onto William's soft blanket. "I couldn't save my Maria," she whispered to him, "but I can save you. I will save you." Dr. Matthews approached quietly, placing a gentle hand on Elena's shoulder. "You're doing beautifully." His color is already improving. 20 minutes passed. William fed until he was satisfied, then fell into his first peaceful sleep since birth. Elena held him a moment longer, memorizing his tiny features, still unable to believe this turn of fate. When Jonathan finally re-entered the nursery, the scene before him stopped him in his tracks. Elena sat bathed in soft lamplight, his son sleeping peacefully in her arms, both their faces marked by tears. Tears of different sorrows, but somehow shared in this extraordinary moment. "He ate," Dr. Matthews confirmed with a smile. "Took a full feeding. His vitals are stabilizing. Mr. Pierce, your son is going to be fine." Jonathan's knees nearly buckled with relief. He crossed the room and looked down at William, seeing real color in his son's cheeks for the first time. "Thank you," he said hoarsely to Elena. "You saved his life." Elena carefully transferred the sleeping baby to his bassinet. "I only did what any mother would do." "You're not his mother," Jonathan said, then immediately regretted the harshness of his words, the reminder of Catherine's absence, but Elena just smiled sadly. "No, but tonight, I was what he needed. That's enough." Dr. Matthews packed her equipment, clearly relieved. "Elena, I'll need to run some standard health screenings on you. Completely routine for any nursing situation. And Mr. Pierce, you'll need to make some decisions about how to handle William's feeding going forward. There are options. Elena continuing to nurse him, pumping milk for bottles, or gradually transitioning to formula. But for tonight, you have time to breathe." After the doctor left, Jonathan stood alone with Elena in the nursery. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken complications. "I don't know how to thank you properly," he finally said. "This arrangement, I'll compensate you, of course. Whatever you need." "I don't want money for this," Elena interrupted gently but firmly. "This is not a job. This is—" she struggled for words. "This is healing. For him and for me." By morning, the Pierce penthouse had transformed into something resembling a plan. Dr. Matthews returned with Elena's test results, all clear, and sat down with Jonathan to discuss the reality of the situation. "This can work," she said, spreading papers across the dining table that probably cost more than Elena's entire village made in a year. "But we need to be thoughtful. Elena will need proper nutrition, rest, and privacy. William will need regular feedings, every 2 to 3 hours at this age. And you, Mr. Pierce, will need to prepare for the scrutiny this might bring." "Scrutiny?" Jonathan asked, sipping his first coffee in what felt like days. "You're one of the most prominent businessmen in New York. Your wife just died tragically. If word gets out that your household staff is nursing your child, the media will have opinions. Your board might have opinions. Society will definitely have opinions." Jonathan set down his cup with controlled force. "I don't care about opinions. I care about my son surviving." "Good," Dr. Matthews said. "Then here's what I recommend. Keep this private. Limit staff who know about the arrangement. Tell people William is being formula-fed or that you've hired a wet nurse. That's a recognized historical profession, less likely to raise eyebrows. And most importantly, make sure Elena is cared for. She's performing a vital service, and her health directly impacts William's health. Elena had been listening from the doorway, still unsure of her place in this wealthy world. I should move into the apartment, she said quietly. If William needs to eat every few hours, it doesn't make sense for me to go to my room in the staff quarters downstairs. Jonathan considered this. The penthouse had 6 bedrooms, 4 of them unused. There's a suite next to the nursery. It has its own bathroom. It was supposed to be for Catherine's mother when she visited, but... He trailed off. I'll move my things, Elena said simply. Over the following days, a rhythm developed. Elena cared for William with a tenderness that transcended her employment. She sang him Spanish lullabies her own mother had sung to her. She talked to him constantly in her musical accent, telling him stories about mountains and coffee farms and hummingbirds that drank from red flowers. Jonathan watched from a distance, still drowning in grief for Catherine, but grateful beyond words for William's steady improvement. The baby was gaining weight, his color healthy, his cries now normal infant fussiness, rather than the desperate hunger that had nearly killed him. But late one evening, returning home from his first day back at the office, Jonathan heard something that stopped him in the hallway. Elena was in the nursery, singing to William, her voice soft but clear. No te preocupes, mi amor. I know your mama had to go to heaven. I know you miss her even though you never knew her. But you're not alone. You'll never be alone. I promise you this. Jonathan stood frozen, hearing the crack in her voice, understanding suddenly that Elena wasn't just feeding his son. She was pouring her interrupted motherhood into caring for a baby who'd lost his mother, creating something beautiful from 2 different kinds of grief. He entered the nursery quietly. Elena looked up, startled, expecting perhaps to be scolded for overstepping boundaries. Instead, Jonathan said, "You loved your daughter very much." It wasn't a question. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Maria. She was perfect. 3 weeks old when the fever came. There was no medicine in our village, no hospital close enough. I held her and... She couldn't finish. I'm sorry, Jonathan said, and meant it with a depth that surprised him. I'm sorry you lost her, and I'm grateful more than you could know that you're sharing what should have been hers with William. She would want this, Elena whispered. She would want another baby to live. 3 weeks into the arrangement, Jonathan's sister Victoria arrived unannounced from Boston, her designer heels clicking sharply across the marble foyer. Jonathan, darling, I came as soon as I could get away, she said, embracing him with the kind of hug that looked affectionate but felt obligatory. How are you managing? Where's the baby? Have you found proper care? I have recommendations for several excellent nanny agencies. William is fine, Jonathan interrupted. He's being well cared for. Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. By whom? You didn't mention hiring anyone in our phone calls. Before Jonathan could answer, Elena appeared from the nursery with William in her arms. The baby was contentedly drowsy, clearly just fed. Victoria's sharp eyes took in the scene. The young woman's disheveled hair, her comfortable clothes, the intimate way she held the infant. And you are? Victoria asked with frost in her voice. Elena Rodriguez, ma'am. I help care for William. I see. Victoria's tone suggested she saw quite a bit more than that. She waited until Elena returned to the nursery, then rounded on her brother. Jonathan, please tell me you're not sleeping with the help barely a month after Catherine's death. Don't be ridiculous, Jonathan snapped. Elena is saving William's life. By what exactly? She looks like she's playing house with your son. Jonathan took a deep breath, knowing he had to tell someone eventually. He explained the feeding crisis, Elena's solution, William's recovery. Victoria listened with growing horror. You let a stranger breastfeed your child, she hissed. Jonathan, do you have any idea how inappropriate this is? How it would look if anyone found out? The board would have your head. The press would crucify you. And poor Catherine. She stopped, weaponizing his dead wife's name. Catherine would want our son alive, Jonathan said coldly, which he nearly wasn't until Elena helped him. Don't you dare use my wife's memory to attack the person who saved our child." Victoria's expression shifted, calculating. "I'm not attacking anyone. I'm protecting this family's reputation. There are proper channels for this sort of thing. Agencies, legal contracts, medical supervision. We have medical supervision. Dr. Matthews oversees everything. Then let me at least hire a proper lawyer to draw up an ironclad agreement. Protect yourself, Jonathan. This girl could claim anything. That William is hers. That you took advantage of her, that." "Enough." Jonathan's voice carried the steel that made subordinates jump. "Elena is a guest in my home, not a threat. This conversation is over." But after Victoria left, doubt crept in. Was he being naive? He barely knew Elena. She'd appeared at exactly the right moment with exactly the right solution. In his world, corporate America's Shark Tank, such coincidences didn't exist without ulterior motives. That evening, he found himself watching Elena more critically as she cared for William. She noticed, of course. After putting the baby down, she turned to face him directly. "Your sister thinks I'm going to hurt you somehow," she said quietly. "She thinks I have a plan." Jonathan didn't deny it. "Do you?" "Yes," Elena said, surprising him with her honesty. "My plan is to help William grow strong and healthy. My plan is to honor my daughter's memory by making sure another mother's son survives. My plan is to earn enough money to maybe go to nursing school someday, to make something of the second chance America gave me." She paused. "Those are my terrible schemes, Mr. Pierce." Shame washed over Jonathan. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have doubted." "But you should," Elena interrupted. "You don't know me. You're right to protect your son. I would do the same." She moved toward the door, then turned back. "I'll stay as long as William needs me. But the day he doesn't, I'll leave. I promise I won't become a complication in your life." The weeks turned into 2 months. William thrived, growing chubby and alert, his blue eyes beginning to focus on the faces around him. Elena remained his primary caregiver, feeding him every few hours, soothing his cries, celebrating his first smile. And Jonathan, despite his best efforts to remain distant and professional, found himself drawn into their orbit. It started small. He'd come home from work and find himself walking directly to the nursery instead of his study. He'd sit in the corner chair while Elena fed William, and they'd talk, really talk, in a way he hadn't with anyone since Catherine died. Elena told him about Guatemala, about coffee harvests and village festivals, about her mother, who made the best pipián, and her father, who carved saints from wood. She told him about falling in love at 19 with a boy who promised her the world, about discovering she was pregnant just as he disappeared with another girl, about her family's shame that turned to love the moment Maria was born. In return, Jonathan found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone, about feeling like a failure as a husband because he couldn't save Catherine, about his terror that he'd fail William too, about growing up with everything money could buy, but parents too busy acquiring more money to actually raise him. "That's why Victoria is the way she is," he explained one night. "We were raised by nannies and boarding schools. Love was a quarterly wire transfer." "That's sad," Elena said softly, rocking William. "Money can't hug you when you're scared. It can't sing you to sleep." "No," Jonathan agreed, watching her with William. "It can't." Dr. Matthews noticed a change during her monthly checkup. "You look better," she told Jonathan. "Less like you're about to shatter." "Elena is. She's been good for the household," he said carefully. The doctor smiled knowingly. "She's been good for you too. There's no shame in accepting help, Jonathan, or in forming connections with people who care for your son." But connection was a dangerous thing in Jonathan's experience. Connection meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant loss, a lesson Catherine's death had carved into his soul. Still, he couldn't seem to stop himself from seeking out Elena's company. He began coming home earlier, sometimes bringing dinner for both of them. They'd eat together while William slept, talking for hours about everything and nothing. One evening, Elena laughed at one of his stories about a disastrous board meeting, and the sound did something strange to his chest, like a frozen thing beginning to thaw. "You should laugh more," she said. "William needs to hear happy sounds." I haven't had much to laugh about. I know. Me neither. But maybe we can find small happy things together. For William's sake. For William's sake. That was the fiction they both maintained. The safe excuse for why Jonathan now spent every evening in the nursery. Why Elena no longer referred to him as Mr. Pierce in private. Why they developed a shorthand communication that needed no words. On William's 3-month birthday, Jonathan came home with a gift, a small box wrapped in silver paper. Elena looked at it, confused. It's not for William, Jonathan explained. It's for you. A thank you. 3 months of life you've given my son. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a small hummingbird pendant. You mentioned hummingbirds, he said quietly. From Guatemala. I thought. Elena's hands shook as she held the necklace. This is too much. I can't. You can. You've given us something priceless. This is just acknowledgement. She let him fasten it around her neck, his fingers brushing her skin, both of them acutely aware of the inappropriate intimacy of the gesture. When he stepped back, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, something dangerous and impossible and terrifyingly real. Thank you, Elena whispered, touching the pendant. I'll treasure it. That night, Jonathan lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling, acknowledging what he'd been denying for weeks. He was developing feelings for Elena. Not just gratitude, not just appreciation. Real feelings that terrified him. Catherine had been dead only 4 months. Grieving a proper period wasn't some Victorian formality. It was respect for what they'd shared. And Elena was his employee, younger than him, vulnerable in ways that made any romantic feeling inappropriate. But grief and logic couldn't control what his heart was beginning to feel. The shift became undeniable one rainy October evening. Jonathan arrived home soaked from a meeting that ran late, his umbrella having proven useless against the storm. Elena met him in the foyer with a towel, laughing at his bedraggled appearance. You look like a wet cat, she teased, a familiarity that would have been unthinkable months ago. I feel like a drowned rat, he countered, accepting the towel. How's William? Perfect. Fed, changed, sleeping like an angel. You should shower before you catch cold. But Jonathan didn't move. He stood there dripping on the expensive marble, looking at Elena, really looking at her, seeing not just the woman who cared for his son, but the person who'd become essential to his daily happiness. Elena, he said slowly, I need to tell you something. Her smile faded, sensing the seriousness in his tone. Okay. I think I'm. He stopped, the words too enormous, too impossible. I'm starting to care about you. Not as an employee. As more. The silence that followed felt eternal. Elena's expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been reciprocal feeling before settling into sadness. Jonathan, you're grieving, she said gently. You've been through terrible trauma. It's normal to form attachments to people who help you through. Don't, he interrupted. Don't reduce this to grief psychology. I know what grief feels like. This is different. Different how? She crossed her arms, defensive now. I'm the help. I'm the girl who happens to be feeding your baby. In 6 months, when William is weaned and eating solid food, I'll be unnecessary. You'll realize this was just proximity and gratitude and what if it's not? Jonathan stepped closer. What if this is real? Elena's eyes filled with tears. Then it's impossible anyway. You're Jonathan Pierce. You live in a penthouse that costs more than my entire village. You have a dead wife everyone loved. And I'm nobody, a maid who got lucky enough to be useful for a moment. You're not nobody, Jonathan said fiercely. You're the person who saved my son, who taught me how to laugh again, who makes coming home the best part of my day. Stop, Elena whispered. Please stop. Because she took a shaky breath. I feel it too. And that's exactly why we can't do this. The admission hung between them like a living thing. Jonathan's heart pounded. Why can't we? Because I'm supposed to leave, Elena said, tears spilling over. William will wean in a few months, and I'm supposed to go to nursing school, start my real life. Because you're supposed to grieve your wife properly, and eventually find someone from your world. Because fairy tales don't happen to girls like me. Maybe they do, Jonathan said softly. Not without consequences, Elena countered. What would people say? Your sister already hates me. The staff gossips. The media would destroy us both, the poor immigrant girl who seduced the grieving widower. They'd make me into a villain and you into a fool. She was right. Jonathan knew she was right. The world they lived in had rules, expectations, judgments that would rain down on them mercilessly. But standing there, looking at Elena's tear-stained face, feeling the pull between them like gravity, Jonathan found he didn't care about the world's opinion. I'm not asking you to be my girlfriend, he said. Not yet. I know it's too soon, too complicated, but I'm asking you not to run away from this. Give it time. Let's see where it goes naturally. And if where it goes is nowhere? Elena asked. If you wake up in 6 months and realize this was just need masquerading as feeling, then we'll deal with that then. But Elena, please, don't decide for both of us that this is impossible before we even try. Elena touched the hummingbird pendant at her neck, clearly torn. Finally, she nodded. Okay, time. But Jonathan, if this becomes harmful to William, if it complicates his life or hurts him in any way, I'm gone. He comes first. Always. Always, Jonathan agreed. They managed to keep their developing feelings private for almost 2 months. To the outside world, Elena remained William's caregiver, and Jonathan remained the grieving widower focused on his son and company. But in private, in the quiet evening hours after William slept, they grew closer. Nothing physical happened. Both were too conscious of propriety, of William's needs, of the fragility of what was building between them. But emotional intimacy deepened. They learned each other's fears and hopes. They became partners in raising William, making decisions together, celebrating milestones as a team. It felt almost sustainable, almost safe, until Victoria returned for Christmas. She arrived with an entourage, presents, opinions, and a photographer friend doing a feature for a society magazine on Jonathan Pierce's first Christmas, without Catherine. The photo shoot was meant to be tasteful, respectful. Jonathan and William in the elegantly decorated penthouse, the brave father carrying on. But the photographer, sensing a more interesting story, captured an unguarded moment. Jonathan and Elena together in the nursery, his hand on her shoulder as she held William, both of them laughing at something the baby had done. The intimacy in the image was undeniable. Victoria saw it immediately. Delete that, she commanded the photographer. But it's beautiful, the photographer protested. Real. People want to see. Delete it now, or you'll never work in the city again. The photographer reluctantly complied, but the damage was done. Victoria had seen the truth reflected in that captured moment. After the shoot ended, she confronted Jonathan in his study. You're sleeping with her. I'm not, Jonathan said truthfully. I haven't touched her. Don't parse words with me. You're in love with the help. Jesus, Jonathan, it hasn't even been a year since Catherine died. Have you completely lost your mind? I've lost my wife, Jonathan shot back. I've nearly lost my son. Maybe I'm finally finding something that feels like hope. Hope? Victoria laughed bitterly. She's using you. Can't you see that? She's an immigrant with nothing, and you're a meal ticket. She's probably been planning this from the moment she walked into this apartment. Get out, Jonathan said quietly. I'm your sister. I'm trying to protect. You're trying to protect the Pierce name and reputation. Not me. Not William. Now get out of my home. Victoria left, but her words lingered like poison. More dangerously, she made calls. 3 days later, Page 6 ran a blind item. Which recently widowed Manhattan mogul has gotten very close with his son's caregiver? Sources say the relationship goes beyond professional, and the woman in question isn't what she seems. Stay tuned for more. Jonathan's phone exploded with calls. Board members concerned about his judgment. Business partners making pointed jokes. Catherine's family demanding to know if the rumors were true. And Elena, reading the item on her phone, felt her world collapse. I have to leave, she told Jonathan that evening. This is exactly what I warned you about. They're making me into a gold digger, making you into a fool. So we tell the truth, Jonathan argued. That you saved William's life. That our feelings develop naturally. That the truth doesn't matter. Elena interrupted. I'm the poor immigrant. You're the billionaire. The narrative is already written. And William. She looked at the sleeping baby. He deserves better than growing up with a scandal surrounding his first year of life. He deserves to be raised by people who love him, Jonathan countered. Which includes you. I do love him, Elena said, tears streaming. That's why I'm leaving. Staying makes things worse. They argued through the night, neither willing to concede. But in the morning, Elena's resolve hardened when she found an envelope that had been slipped under the apartment door. Inside were photos, taken with a long lens through the penthouse windows. Images of her feeding William, of her and Jonathan sitting close on the sofa, of him fastening the necklace around her neck, and a note. Leave now and these stay private. Stay, and I'll make sure every news outlet in New York sees them. You're destroying this family. Go. No signature. But Elena recognized Victoria's expensive stationery. Elena showed Jonathan the envelope with shaking hands. His face went white with rage, then red. She wouldn't, he said, but without conviction. Victoria would absolutely do this to protect what she saw as the family's interests. She already has, Elena said softly. And she's right about one thing. This is destroying you. Your business, your reputation, your late wife's memory. All for what? A relationship that might not even last. Don't, Jonathan pleaded. Don't do this. I have to. For William. For you. Her voice broke. For me too. Because staying like this, always looking over our shoulders, always one scandal away from disaster, that's not love. That's just pain in a different form. They stood in the nursery where it had all begun 5 months ago, where Elena had first saved William's life. The baby slept peacefully in his crib, unaware that his world was about to change. What if I fire Victoria? Jonathan said desperately. Cut her off completely? She's your sister, and she's not wrong about the optics. I knew this was impossible from the start. I let myself hope anyway. Elena, please. No. She stepped back, strengthening her resolve. I need to wean William starting now. Dr. Matthews said he's ready for more solid foods anyway. In 2 weeks, he won't need me anymore. And then I'll leave. Find a nursing program somewhere far from New York. Start over again. You're running away. I'm choosing dignity, Elena corrected. For all of us. Your son will grow up without tabloid stories about the maid who seduced his father months after his mother died. You'll rebuild your reputation and eventually find someone appropriate. And She couldn't finish that sentence. Jonathan pulled her into his arms, both of them crying now. I love you, he said. I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but it's true. I love you too, Elena whispered against his chest. That's why I have to go. The next 2 weeks were agony. Elena gradually introduced bottles and solid foods to William, reducing feedings until they stopped completely. The baby fussed at first but adapted. Children were resilient, Dr. Matthews assured them. He'd be fine. Jonathan made one last desperate attempt. On Elena's final evening, he presented her with a formal document drawn up by his lawyers. A contract offering her a full college scholarship, an apartment, a generous stipend, and most importantly, continued involvement in William's life as a godmother and trusted family friend. No romance, he said. Just don't disappear completely. Let me help you build your future. Let William know you as he grows up. Elena read the document through tears. It was generous beyond measure, life-changing. But accepting it would mean staying tethered to a family she could never truly be part of. Watching Jonathan eventually marry someone else. Watching William call another woman mother. I can't, she said finally. If I take this, I'll never move on. And you won't either. Clean breaks heal better than lingering wounds. She knelt beside William's crib one last time. You won't remember me, she whispered to the sleeping child. But I'll remember you always. You gave my life meaning when I thought it had none. Thank you, Pequenito. To Jonathan, she returned the hummingbird necklace. Give this to William when he's older. Tell him it belonged to someone who loved him very much. Elena, don't do this. Goodbye, Jonathan. She kissed his cheek gently. Be happy. Raise William to be kind. And maybe someday, tell him about the girl from Guatemala who fed him when bottles wouldn't work. Make it a good story. She walked out of the penthouse with a single suitcase, the same one she'd arrived with 6 months ago. In her pocket was a check Jonathan had insisted she take, enough to pay for nursing school and more. She'd accept that much. She'd earned it. 3 years later, Elena graduated top of her nursing class in Chicago. She worked in a pediatric ward, specializing in newborn care. She never married, never had other children. But she had William's first baby photo on her nightstand, and sometimes she let herself imagine his life, picturing him learning to walk, to talk, to read. And Jonathan, true to his word, kept the hummingbird necklace in his safe. When William was old enough to understand, he would tell him the story of the young woman who saved his life with her kindness and sacrifice. He'd tell it as what it was, a love story, not a scandal, a gift, not a taking. Because some love stories don't end with together forever. Some end with grateful hearts, changed lives, and the bittersweet knowledge that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let go. But that doesn't make the love any less real. The end. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more emotional true life stories. Sometimes the most powerful love stories are the ones where love means sacrifice.